Let me start with some general philosophy before moving on to talk about particular instances of biological design. But before we dissect the physical world and its strange, often disturbing mechanics, we need to put this idea of design into a biblical context, especially with the Abrahamic faiths in mind. According to the book of Genesis, God created Adam and Eve in a supposedly perfect scenario, a paradise, an untouched Eden. And yet, in this pristine garden, they were handed one monumental test, one simple command: do not eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. At first glance, it may seem like a straightforward story, but look again. This tale sets up a conundrum before it even begins to unfold. How could Adam and Eve be expected to make the right moral choice when the very knowledge of right and wrong was the reward, or punishment, of disobeying? They had to know it was wrong to disobey God before eating the fruit that would tell them what wrong even was. They were punished for choosing wrongly before having any framework to define wrongdoing. Damn this logic game. It's more than just a wrinkle in the narrative. It's a foundational flaw in the coherence of the myth itself. Of course, this story was never meant to be read as an eyewitness account or a slice of literal history. It's a myth. And myths, by their nature, aren't beholden to the rules of logic or consistency. They're meant to explain the human condition in sweeping strokes, not nitpick-worthy detail. So let's accept that much and move forward. Within the parameters of this story, Adam and Eve represent humanity as a whole. They're the test subjects chosen to stand in for us all. But here's the thing. God, being omniscient, already knows the outcome of the test before it begins. It creates Adam and Eve, knowing full well they will fail. It chooses them, knowing they are flawed. This is the biblical version of knowingly programming a glitch into your software, running it anyway, and then punishing the program for crashing. And if Adam and Eve truly are representative of all humans, then the implication is clear. Any of us, placed in that situation, would have failed. Every one of us, you, me, everyone we know, we would have done exactly the same thing. That would make humanity fundamentally flawed from inception. It would mean that perfect design was never part of the equation. It would mean the test was always going to end in failure. But if Adam and Eve aren't representative, if they were uniquely flawed individuals, then we're in an even stranger scenario. That would mean God chose two unfit candidates to take a universal test on behalf of all humanity. If I had been there, or you, maybe we would have passed. Maybe we would have obeyed. But we weren't given that chance. Instead, based on the failure of these two people, the rest of humanity has inherited punishment, guilt, and the stain of original sin. It's already bad enough being told we're being punished because we're all equally flawed. It's arguably worse to be punished because someone else was flawed and we were never even allowed the opportunity to prove otherwise. That's not justice. That's divine scapegoating. So here's the double-edged sword. Either God is a poor designer who created beings incapable of passing the test he set, or he is morally reprehensible for setting up a punishment structure based on the failure of non-representative individuals. God is either a poor designer or a moral monster, and perhaps both. This conundrum has not gone unnoticed. Dan Barker, among many others, has recognized this theological dilemma. He states what seems unavoidably true. The Christian God cannot be both omniscient and omnibenevolent. If God were truly omniscient, then he knew from the very beginning that Adam would sin. He knew that the human race would suffer immeasurably. The fall wasn't a surprise. It was baked into the recipe. So even if you find a way to explain the existence of evil, even if you bend over backward to create a theology that justifies pain, you're still left with this central problem. An all-knowing creator chose to place human beings in the path of guaranteed suffering. That alone amounts to, at the very least, criminal negligence. And arguably worse, malice. And those who invoke the idea of free will as a shield against this problem miss a key detail. Yes, humans have free will, but according to traditional theology, Our nature was designed by God. We act in accordance with that nature. Adam did not create himself. He did not manufacture his own inclinations or cognitive limitations. Those were given to him. So at the moment of his creation, God, omniscient and eternal, could already see every consequence of every decision Adam would make. God was not surprised by the fall. He saw the bloodline of suffering it would unleash. He saw the cries of the dying, the screams of the tortured, the blind stumbling in the dark, and created anyway. This isn't divine love. This is mean-spiritedness cloaked in holiness. If that's the framework, then maybe the universe would have been better off with a divine abortion. Perhaps there is a lesser God, or a malicious one. But if you claim that God is both all-powerful and all-good, then the existence of evil becomes an unmovable stone in the path of faith. Let's now pivot from myth to biology, from theology to physiology, from ancient scripture to evolutionary design. Because here too, the evidence is damning. Welcome to the world of biological design, a world in which suffering seems not just common, but fundamental. Let me introduce you to Onchocerca volvulus, the parasite responsible for river blindness. A worm so small you need a microscope to see it, yet its impact is colossal. It's transmitted by black flies that breed near fast-moving rivers in parts of West Africa, South America, and Yemen. One bite might not be significant, but repeated exposure can result in hundreds of thousands of larvae infesting the human body. And they're not content to lie dormant. When they die, they release bacteria that our immune systems overreact to. The inflammation caused by this overreaction leads to extreme skin irritation, loss of elasticity, and premature wrinkling. If the larvae die on the surface of the eye, the cornea becomes inflamed. Left untreated, it clouds over. The result? Blindness. If the worms reach the optic nerve and die there, blindness is permanent. In some regions, up to 40% of village populations have gone blind. Entire communities have been forced to abandon arable land. This, we're told, is part of God's creation. If you're a theist who denies evolution, you must believe that God designed this creature to do what it does, that He wanted it to exist, that He thought the world needed a parasite that blinds children and devastates communities. And if you're a theist who accepts evolution, you must still believe that God, with complete sovereignty, stood by while this horror emerged and chose not to intervene. Either way, you're stuck with a deity who allows, enables, or directly creates immense suffering. And it does not stop there. Human anatomy is riddled with what any engineer would call catastrophic flaws. Let us start with childbirth. Women have narrow birth canals. The result? Painful and dangerous births. And yes, maternal death. Pregnancy itself comes with potentially fatal complications like ectopic pregnancies, where a fertilized egg implants somewhere other than the uterus. If untreated, these can be deadly. Then there is our digestive and respiratory tracts, which share the same passage. That is right. Breathing and eating operate through the same system. The result? Choking. A cause of death that could have been easily avoided if humans were designed like whales, whose systems are separated. Speaking of design flaws, let us consider hernias. These painful, sometimes deadly protrusions are the result of a weakened abdominal wall, an issue directly tied to the way male testes develop. And who can forget wisdom teeth? Vestigial, often painful and frequently impacted. Then there is the appendix, useless today, but highly prone to dangerous inflammation and rupture. And what about muscles and nerves that serve no purpose? Muscles that once moved ears, but are now functionless. Nerves that wrap inefficiently through the body. Our spines are another disaster. Poorly adapted to upright posture, vulnerable to damage, and incapable of self-repair. The gene that lets other mammals synthesize vitamin C? Ours is broken. Without supplements or fruit, we get scurvy. The human eye? a backward structure with a built-in blind spot due to an inverted retina. You get the picture. And these flaws are not exclusive to humans. They are evident across all species. Evolution explains all of this. Evolution does not care about optimization. It just gets the job done. It works with what it has, adapting pre-existing structures to new functions. It is a brutal, indifferent tinkerer. And when you look at life through that lens, bad design makes perfect sense. But through the lens of a divine creator, especially one who is said to be perfect, all-knowing, and all-loving, it becomes a sick joke. And yet, theists try to explain these flaws. They deny evolution, or they embrace it but claim it is God's tool. Either way, they must perform incredible mental gymnastics to rationalize why an all-powerful God allows parasites to blind babies, or why choking is even possible. They must explain why death, disability, and pain exist, and why their God, who could prevent them, chooses not to. This is the essence of the dysteleological argument. If God existed as described, the world would not look like this. The naturalist sees poor design and understands it as the outcome of a blind, indifferent process. The theist sees poor design and tries to retrofit God into the narrative. But every fix they attempt makes their case weaker. And in the end, it makes God look not only unnecessary, but cruel. If you are starting to see the cracks in the so-called divine design, stay curious and keep questioning. If this made you rethink the design of life, like the video, share it on your social media, and subscribe. Stay with us and explore what else they do not want you to question. And if you like this work, good ways to support the channel are Patreon membership or PayPal.